Hello there, my name is Julian Humphrys, and were things a bit different, I'll be doing these presentations for real, but that isn't possible at the moment, so I've decamped to my back garden and I'll do my best from there. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. A word about the models that I'll be using in this talk. They're Britain's Swap-It Knights from the 1960s, and I must say that when I was a kid, they were on all my friends' Christmas present list. They were great toys to collect because you could swap around the helmets, change the weapons. I guess the clue's in the name Swap-Its really, isn't it? I thought it was quite clever the way that they kept the shields on. You can see you used roses, white and red ones. Actually a bit unheraldic because at the time people fought under the livery badges of their lords, portcullises for Beaufort, some for York and so on. But there we are. They're also slightly unhistorical insofar as the knights are wearing the sort of crests and mantlets that would rarely appear on the battlefield. And of course, most soldiers wouldn't have come in full armour like this. They would have worn maybe a helmet and a padded jack. But maybe this is nitpicking because they really are, as you can see, very beautiful models. Right, so here we are, Bosworth Field, 22nd of August, 1485. We're looking southwestwards down the old Roman road with Leicester behind us and Warwickshire in front of us. And I've had a stab at laying out how the two armies might have deployed. And I say might because the problem for Bosworth is that the sources are extremely scanty. We've got nothing from Richard's army, and much of the detail that is in the chronicles and the ballads is, to be honest, rather unreliable. They often invent dialogue, they regularly exaggerate numbers, they're uncertain of the names, and often things are written because it was conventional to write such things. And so it is difficult to be sure about a lot at Bosworth. But there are certain things that we know, that we think we know, and I've had a go here at trying to give at least an idea of what happened. But there is a big caveat here that what I'm saying here actually could be completely wrong. So looking at Richard's army, which we think was probably around about 7,000 to 8,000 men in all. There's a vanguard under the Duke of Norfolk, mixture of archers, men with pole arms and so on. A rear guard under the Earl of Northumberland. We don't exactly know where it was, and also a number of guns. And again, we're not certain where those guns were on the battlefield. And then you can see in the rear there Richard with his household mounted troops there. Facing them on the far side of the battlefield, you've got Henry Tudor's army, probably about 5,000 men, with a vanguard led by the Earl of Oxford, John de Vere, who had fought at Barnet, nearly 15 years before. And his vanguard was quite a mixed force. I think there were English and Welsh troops there. There might have been some Scots. There was certainly a substantial contingent of French. Maybe up to 2,000 of Henry's troops came from France. Again, we don't know too much about them. Some people think that they were equipped with pikes. Others are not so sure. None of the chroniclers say this, but it is known that the French had started using pikes at this time. And so it's not unreasonable to assume that at least some of those French soldiers were equipped with the pike, which of course was quite a new weapon, something that the English had not really come across before this. You can see Henry to the rear there, and just as you look at it, to the left of Oxford's force, there is a kind of splodgy area that I've created, and that stands for the marsh that was present at the time, although now it's much drier there. And that marsh would play quite an important part in the battle, not least because Henry's outnumbered army used it really to guard its flank. And as you can see here, they sort of avoided the Ricardian guns. One of the problems with these guns, as Dr. Dan Spencer has pointed out, is once you plonk them down on the battlefield, it was quite difficult to move them. So if you wanted to avoid them, you just skirted them. And the accounts do say, particularly the French, that they spotted where the guns were and they made a bit of a circular march to avoid them. So you can see that Oxford and his French troops over on his left are avoiding the guns, and their flank is protected by that marsh. Then you've got the Stanleys. Now, the Stanleys have been gone down in history, I suppose, as these archetypal fence sitters. But I think that at Bosworth, it was pretty clear that they were going to support Henry Tudor. After all, one of the Stanleys was married to Henry Tudor's mother. Where they were on the battlefield, we don't really know. I think you have to imagine that where I've put them, there's a bit of a hill over there, and they're somewhere over in that area. And it's not a question of, I think, whose side they're going to join, or if they're going to join. It's a question of when they're going to join the battle. The other thing that's quite perplexing in this battle is the actions, or rather non-actions, of the Earl of Northumberland, because he doesn't commit at all throughout the battle. And we really don't know why, but there are a number of reasons that have been put forward. One is that he was pinned in position by the Stanleys. Another is that the marsh was in the way. A third is treachery. And a fourth is that because he was the rear guard, it might have been the case that the battle was virtually over before he could even get involved in it. And of course, once Richard III was dead, since this was a battle really between these two kings, there was nothing to fight for anyway. So throughout this battle, Northumberland will be no more than a spectator. And as I say, it has puzzled historians on exactly why that is. Well, it seems likely that the battle began with the customary archery duel, and there was also artillery bombardment, certainly on the part of Richard. We know that he had guns, and it's quite possible that Henry Tudor had managed to pick some up as well on his march through Wales across to Bosworth. And of course, it's the cannonballs and shot from those guns that has helped us in the past identify where the battle was actually fought. Well, the hand-to-hand fighting has now begun as Oxford's Tudor vanguard struggle against Norfolk's Yorkist vanguard. You can see that Northumberland still watches on, and just lurking out of shot over to the left are the Stanleys. And it's the Earl of Oxford who comes off best in this fight as his troops push back their Yorkist opponents. Now, Oxford had been on the losing side at the Battle of Barnet back in 1471 when his troops had driven off their opponents but then charged off the battlefield in pursuit, and he wasn't going to let it happen again. So at this battle, he was very strict about keeping control of where his men should go and not allow them to advance too far. So actually, Richard is already in trouble. His vanguard has been defeated. Northumberland's troops have either not arrived or are not committed. And of course, the Stanleys are lurking menacingly on a distant hill. But then Richard sees an opportunity. Henry Tudor and his entourage have become separated from the main part of his army. We don't know why. It's possible that they were going over to confer with William Stanley. But Richard realises or thinks that if he can reach Henry Tudor and kill him, it doesn't matter what happens in the rest of the battle. The whole battle would then be over. So he gathers together his household knights and leads them in a desperate do-or-die effort to reach Henry Tudor and kill him. And he very nearly pulls it off. Led by Richard himself, his knights crash into Henry Tudor's entourage. Again, we're not absolutely certain what happened here. Was Henry Tudor's entourage all mounted? Was it a mixture of foot soldiers and mounted troops? Well, we know that at least some of them were mounted because of what happened next. Richard personally kills Sir William Brandon, who was Henry Tudor's standard bearer. He's now within almost touching distance of Henry, but first he's got to get past Sir John Cheney. John Cheney was a giant of a man who was in effect Henry Tudor's bodyguard. Now, on the face of it, it was a bit of a mismatch. The giant John Cheney and the rather slight Richard III. But it's Richard that prevails in this combat, and he manages to unhorse Cheney, sending him stunned to the ground. However, Richard's charge is now running out of steam, and the Stanleys, if they hadn't done so already, were now definitely entering the fray. Richard was now in desperate trouble. His household knights had been scattered or killed, his enemies were closing in, he can get no help from Northumberland, and then his horse gets stuck in a marsh. He's forced to dismount, and surrounded by his enemies, he goes down fighting. So, instead of Henry, it was Richard who had been killed, and with his death, the battle was effectively over. Henry Tudor had won the crown.